All right, last section for your ecosystem ecology. I apologize that there are 3 videos, but it seemed better to chunk it in these learnable sections, right? We've done the flow of matter, the flow of chemicals. Now we're going to talk about, or the flow of energy, the flow of chemicals and matter, and now we're going to talk about the biomes that make up our whole biosphere, right? The living earth, essentially. Um, when we talk about aquatic biomes, just knowledge that there's a lot of them and having a general sense of the different aquatic biomes is going to be important. But there's a lot, and literally, people spend their whole life just studying a single aquatic biome. Aquatic biomes being your water based biomes. You're going to have your lakes, rivers, and estuaries. Those are going to be in green on this map. They are going to be your freshwater biomes. And then you have your intertidal zones. Those are the areas that are sometimes just sand, sometimes ocean water, right, where the tides come in and out. Those are going to be salt water, essentially. You've got your coral reefs, which are shown in pink. Those are going to be very, very complex biomes on your own. Ocean pelagic, which is essentially your ocean. And there's multiple zones within the ocean that we won't really get into. And then the abyssal zones, which are the very deep zones. So anywhere there is a very deep cave because of the movement of tectonic plates, which is why we see it around like the different continents that have moved away, is why we get the very deep undersea, basically ravines. When we look at lakes, freshwater biome, we talk about the idea of stratification. Essentially, a lake is made up of multiple layers, similar to any other aquatic biome, but lakes show it kind of the best. We see that in these different stratifications or layers, we see that there are a couple of things that we can determine based on the first the season, and the season will tell us a lot about oxygen, temperature, and also dissolved nutrients. We'll see that in the winter we have some stratification based on temperature and on oxygen content. Um, Oxygen content does not really vary throughout the seasons. It's usually going to be staying in the bottom area, highest oxygen content on the surface. This is because oxygen um, will leave the aquatic plants and move to the surface if they are making oxygen. We see that temperature during the winter is warmest at the base of the lake because the cold air is not reaching it. We see that in spring and autumn, there's a lot of cycling of water, and so the temperature and the oxygen concentration is pretty stable. We see that in the summer, our oxygen concentration is the same as the winter, but the temperature changes a little bit so that there is a deeper layer of warm water above a very cooler, deeper layer. When we talk about these zones of a lake biome, this will come into play. I believe there was an AP question about this last year or the year before, understanding the zones of lakes and also oceans. This basically applies to all bodies of water. If we look at lakes first, we see that depth-wise, we have essentially 2 layers, the photic zone and the benthic zone. Photic zone is typically where most of the organisms are dwelling. Benthic gets deep into the water. So that's when we look at from top to bottom. When we look across the surface of the water, the littoral zone is closest to the coastline. The limnetic zone is going to be in the center of your lake. The profundal zone, I'm not going to ask you to know that. Make sure you know that. If we're looking across the lake, there are 2 zones, and if you're going from the top down into the depths of the lake, there are 2 zones. The same is true essentially for the ocean. The one varying thing is if you're looking across the surface. If you're looking at the depths of the ocean, again, you have the photic and the benthic zone. The abyssal zone is an additional deeper area if they have it in the ocean. On the surface, if you look at across the ocean, the intertidal zone is going to be the area of sand where the tide comes in and out. The neritic zone is going to be the next kind of layer that the water always covers, but is still not very deep. And the oceanic zone is going to be your center of the ocean, essentially. And so I would make sure that we know those terms. Other biomes that we need to know about, or other like terms that I would recommend that you know, understanding the freshwater biomes and where they're located. So when we talk about fresh water, besides our lakes, we also have wetlands and estuaries. These are considered to be transitional zones between freshwater and marine water. They tend to be a mix depending on the geographic location. We call this water brackish water, not totally fresh water, not totally salt water. Usually these occur on the coast. We then have our marine biomes. So if you talk about biomes, aquatic biomes, you could divide them into three main groups, right? Freshwater, our brackish or semi-marine biomes, and our marine biomes. Your marine biomes are going to be the tide zone, the black smoke zone, benthos zone, coral reef zone or area. All of them have different traits. I wouldn't look too far into knowing much about these. Just knowing that they exist and if they are marine or freshwater is going to be what's important. Moving on to your terrestrial biomes, typically for the AP test, I would say when it comes to aquatic biomes, understanding the different layers that we covered, right, of the lake and the marine biomes, and understanding those estuaries and wetlands is going to be important. When we talk about terrestrial biomes, knowledge of the different biomes is going to be a little bit more important. It's more common to see questions about specific terrestrial or land biomes. This map gives us a good picture of essentially the 9 biomes that you're going to need to know. I would pause them and maybe write these out because I'm going to go over each of them, just a little bit of information about each. So let's go through them quickly. Tropical rainforest biome. This we see really heavy rainfall, really dense foliage. Specific species dwell in tropical rainforests, and these really are only located in the northern parts of South America, select parts of Africa, and Southeast Asia, northern Australia a little bit as well. When we talk about the savanna biome, we are talking about limited rain peppered with a monsoon season, essentially. We see that this is present in Africa mostly. I'm very familiar with this because I spent some time in Kenya, and we see that the savanna is your typical, Lion King biome. Not a lot of rain, a lot of organisms that can dwell in desert-like climates with short spurts of very heavy rainy seasons. The next that gets a step closer or loses even more water is going to be your desert biome. Desert biomes have minimal rainfall. Usually when we talk about biomes, rainfall is going to be the key factor. Desert biomes have the least amount of rainfall. There are very few large organisms because only small organisms can succeed in an environment with such limited water. We also see very little plant life besides cacti and other organisms. And when we talk about plants and evolution, we'll see that these plants are highly adapted to this biome, right? Technically, those needles on the cacti were leaves at one point, and they are now essentially vestigial structures. They're not leaves anymore because leaves lose way too much water through a process called transpiration for it to be beneficial in a desert area. The chaparral, also called the scrubland, this is very limited. As you can see on the map, there are very small green areas where we see the chaparral. This is kind of the borderlands of the desert. We see slightly more rain in these areas. Yeah, not much to say about this. Feel free to look it up if you'd like to know more, but think of it as basically the border around a desert before it segues into something with heavier rains. When we get into the different temperate areas, temperate grasslands are going to be like central North America. We see a lot of this in China. Um, the term grasslands indicates that like grass is the largest, the most prevalent plant life, and we see that this is not dominated by tree-like species. The temperate forest, and it does make sense to mention that temperate indicates that there are seasonal changes, whereas when we talk about the desert, the chaparral, we see that they have very long summers and they have very short winters and falls. Temperate, we're going to start to see a more equal division between the four seasons. Temperate forest, this is the temperate deciduous forest, technically, is the biome that we live in. We see a very equal division between the four seasons. We see a lot of deciduous trees. That's going to be your non-coniferous trees, so maple trees, which is what turns such beautiful colors. We also have coniferous trees, but we are characterized by more deciduous trees. The taiga, also called the coniferous or the boreal forest, this is going to be north of us, so then we see that the most common tree is going to be your coniferous tree, so cone-bearing needle trees. This is in northern Russia, north of China, north of us, Canada. Precipitation is usually snow as opposed to rain, and we see that the length of fall and winter is going to be slightly longer in the taiga. The tundra north of that shows a markedly different season division. Basically, we see that there is going to be a lot of winter, fall, spring, not a lot of summer at all. We're going to see that there's going to be not a lot of variation in temperature. There's going to be a spike in the summer and then not much else. Stays relatively cold all the time. We see also during that spike in temperature a spike in rain as well. This is not technically the Arctic, but this is like, think about Alaska or other parts of northern Canada. We also see that in these areas there's typically, because of their northern location, they're going to go through periods of very short days, long nights, or periods in which sunlight is around for more than 8 hours. So they have periods of very long days, also periods of time where there's going to be basically no sunlight all day. So keep in mind that just knowing that there are these different biomes is going to be important, and being able to identify and differentiate between them is what's going to be important for the AP test. What I want you to be able to do is big picture, apply the idea of a single biome to a full situation and take into account all the communities and the populations and the individual species and organisms that are within that biome and look at how they all interact. And so the knowledge of one biome is, just part of the bigger picture, which is much more important for us to understand as biologists and as AP biology students. Take a minute to pause this and read through it. I would like to talk about this in class on Friday, so if you have questions about this, please and remind me to bring this up in class, the idea of when cycles are out of balance. This is kind of the thing that we will talk about when we come back together after these videos. I'm going to go through these, take a look at these. We're going to talk about this in class.